Jack Carter wasn't special. At least that's what they thought. Zurich Academy, the most prestigious institution in the galaxy, had never accepted a human before. Now, he stood among beings with minds that could process quantum equations in seconds, creatures with lifespans stretching across millennia, and species that had mastered interdimensional thinking. And yet, he was the one they all looked down on. Professor Xylox, a towering biosynthetic entity with glowing circuits running along his translucent skin, addressed the class. His voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Today, you face the simulation confinement exercise," he announced. "It is the ultimate test of intelligence, resourcefulness, and adaptability. You must escape the prison. Few have succeeded. None have done so in less than 3 days. The students, a mix of reptilian strategists, insectoid tacticians, and crystalline intellects, exchanged knowing glances. They had studied the simulation beforehand. It was a shifting maze, a construct designed with no predictable patterns, enforced by adaptive AI that countered every logical move. Even the brightest struggled to outthink it. Jack simply shrugged. "So it's a game?" Laughter rippled through the room. Not the friendly kind, mocking, dismissive. The human had no idea what he was walking into. "You will soon learn, Jack Carter," Xylox said, activating the transfer protocol. Jack felt the pull before he even had a chance to react. His vision blurred, his body stretched, and in an instant he was somewhere else. Darkness, cold metal beneath his hands. His mind adjusted quickly. A vast, endless corridor stretched in both directions, flickering lights illuminating impossible angles. Walls shifted, reshaping the space around him. Somewhere, a mechanical hum signaled the presence of the AI monitors. The air smelled sterile, artificial. He exhaled. "All right, let's see what we're dealing with." Most species would start by analyzing, formulating a strategy. Jack? He just started walking. The walls changed as he moved, attempting to confuse him. He noted the patterns, subtle but there. The floor hummed faintly every time it shifted. The ceiling pulsed when a path closed. It was supposed to be random. It wasn't. He smirked. "You guys think like computers." Jack's first instinct wasn't to play along. It was to break the game. He reached out and knocked on the nearest wall. Solid. He stepped back and kicked it hard. The impact sent a ripple through the surface. Not just a wall, an illusion over something physical. He pulled back and punched again. The illusion flickered. A millisecond delay. That was all he needed. Meanwhile, the other students were moving cautiously, using calculated methods. The reptilian tactician was mapping spatial shifts. The insectoid was running probability matrices. The crystalline life form was adapting to the rhythm. Jack? He just ran full speed at the wall that shouldn't exist. The system hesitated just for a fraction of a second. But that was enough. He phased through, landing hard on the other side. Xylox, monitoring from the outside, frowned. That wasn't supposed to happen. Jack stood, dusting himself off. He was in another chamber now, this one lined with pulsating nodes, the AI sensory network. Security drones hovered in the corners, scanning for movement. They operated on a standard alert response system. Trigger their parameters and they'd lock down. Jack had no time for that. He bent down, grabbed a piece of debris, something small, metallic, tossed it to the far side of the room. The drones immediately shifted their attention. In that half-second window, Jack sprinted forward, sliding under their detection radius and reaching the nearest node. Most students would try hacking. Jack wasn't a hacker, but he knew machines. And machines, no matter how advanced, still had physical components. He grabbed the node and ripped it from its socket. The room went dark for 3 seconds. Enough time to move. Enough time to break something else. Xylox's expression twitched. This was not expected. Jack didn't stop. He wasn't solving a puzzle. He was breaking the system faster than it could react. He tested every boundary. Threw objects at motion sensors to trick them. Used debris as wedges to jam shifting walls. Exploited the AI's own logic against itself. Within 4 minutes, he had bypassed 3 security layers. By 6 minutes, He had reached a sector the AI wasn't even prepared to defend yet. By 8 minutes, the system had stopped adapting, it was lagging behind him. And by 10 minutes, Jack Carter stood at the simulated exit, looking straight into the override panel, locked behind quantum encryption, impenetrable to any known species. Except Jack wasn't any known species. He didn't try to decrypt it. He didn't need to. Instead, he did the dumbest, most reckless, most human thing possible. He reached under the console, grabbed a loose panel, and pulled hard. Wires sparked. Something groaned. The screen flickered, error messages flooding across it in alien script. The AI tried to correct itself, but Jack had already found what it didn't expect. A physical failsafe. He grabbed it and yanked. The simulation collapsed. Xylox's processors stalled for a full 3 seconds. The room fell silent. Every alien student, still struggling through their own sections, was forcibly ejected. Jack Carter stood in the center of the chamber, rubbing his temples. That was fun. What's next? Xylox's artificial eyes narrowed. Impossible. Jack grinned. Nah, you just never had a human try before. Jack Carter wasn't pulsed with frustration. At least that's what they thought. The simulation had never been beaten this quickly, the most prestigious institution in the galaxy. The Academy had never accepted a human before. Jack Carter had not only stood among beings with minds that could process quantum equations in seconds. That was creatures with lifespans stretching across millennia, still disoriented that had mastered interdimensional thinking, stared in disbelief. He was the one they all spent hours carefully analyzing their paths. A towering probability calculation with glowing circuits running along his translucent skin. Jack had done none of that. The class. He had just gone. His voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. But the irritation was undeniable. You faced the simulation confinement exercise. Jack raised an eyebrow. It is the ultimate test of intelligence. You exploited resource oversight and adaptability. An error in the system. You must escape the prison. That is not intelligence. You have succeeded. It is recklessness. None have done so intellect in less than 3 days. Constraints. The students, not by breaking a mix them. Of reptilian Jack strategists. If the system can be broken, and crystalline intellect, exchange knowing glances. Xylox studied the simulation beforehand. Instead, it was a shifting recalibrated the parameters. A construct designed Jack with no predictable patterns, into another simulation enforced by adaptive AI that countered every one that could not be bypassed. Even the brightest struggled to outthink without warning. Jack the floor beneath Jack vanished. So it's a game. Then laughter world snapped into focus. Not the friendly kind, mocking, dismissive. The air was heavier. The human had no idea what he was walking into. A sprawling labyrinth stretched around Jack Carter, endless and shifting. Activating the transfer protocol. They were aware, felt the pull before he even had a chance to counter any potential escape. His vision blurred, the ceiling body stretched, surveillance nodes, and in an instant, tracking his every breath. Darkness. This wasn't just cold metal beneath his hands. It was a living system. His mind designed to react quickly. Jack smirked. Endless corridors stretched in both directions. The first test came immediately. Flickering lights illuminating impossible angles. Perfectly symmetrical. Walls shifted with no visible reshaping exits. The space around no him. Weak points. Somewhere, no structural flaws. A mechanical hum. The walls shifted at unpredictable intervals. The air rendering memorization useless. He exhaled. Most beings would hesitate. Let's see what we're dealing with. He picked up a loose fragment of the floor by analyzing, formulating a strategy. The wall absorbed it. Jack then reconfigured. He just started walking. That was the walls changed as he now moved, knew that the structure responded to contact. He noted he pressed his hand against the surface. The floor hummed faintly every time Jack it shifted. Grinned. The ceiling just a maze. It was interactive. It was supposed to be random. While the alien students would have spent hours mapping the configurations, you guys Jack saw what computers. The system was built on wasn't to play along. The faster it was to break the game, the slower he reached out and knocked on the nearest wall. He took off at a sprint. Solid. The walls scrambled back and kicked it hard, shifting wildly, impact trying to cut him off through the surface. He anticipated them, not just a wall, forced them an illusion over something before physical. They could trap him. He pulled back and punched again. Xylox's processors churned a millisecond delay. This was not how this was supposed to go. Meanwhile, the other students were moving cautiously, thousands of years using calculated modeling. It had countered every species that had ever attempted. The insectoid was running probability matrices. The script. The crystalline life analyzing. He was playing the rhythm. Another obstacle. He just ran the floor was fragmented into floating platforms. The system hesitated, vanishing just for a fraction of a second. But any miscalculation would send him plummeting. Landing hard on the other side. Jack took a deep breath. Xylox monitoring from the outside. He stomped down on one platform. That wasn't supposed to happen. And began to disappear. Jack stood, but something was off. The timing. He was in another chamber now. This one lined with pulsating nodes. The AI that was all he needed. Security drones hopping carefully from platform to platform, scanning for movement. He jumped erratically. They operated on a standard never letting the system predict his movements. Trigger their parameters. It tried to compensate, and they'd lock speeding up and slowing down no time for that. He bent down, Jack was already ahead grabbed of it. A piece of debris. A final leap, something landed on solid ground. Tossed it from the control side of the room. Xylox the drones immediately shifted their attention. The human should have half-second window. Jack sprinted forward. Jack wasn't just adapting, he was forcing the radius and reaching the nearest. The next room was vast. Most students would try hacking, save for an enormous construct in the center. But he knew machines. A sentinel, one of the academy's no matter how advanced AI still had physical components. 7 feet tall, he grabbed the node frame and ripped it with energy. The room went dark for 3 seconds. Most students would calculate combat options, enough time to break something else. Jack just tilted his head, twitched. It moved when he did, not expected. He shifted left. Jack didn't stop. He wasn't solving a puzzle. He took a step forward. He was breaking the sentinel mirrored him. Its programming locked into tracking every boundary. Jack took another step forward at motion sensors to trick abruptly. Used debris as wedges to jam shifting walls. Overcompensated, exploited the AI's own logic. Jack exhaled sharply through his nose. Within 4 minutes, he had bypassed Xylox security layers. That was not supposed to happen. He had reached the sentinel tried the AI wasn't even prepared to defend Jack was already moving. By 8 minutes, forcing it to react adapting. Feedback loop was lagging behind him. And within 10 minutes, it had Jack Carter stood at the simulated exit in the AI's movement looking protocol. Straight into the override Jack took advantage. Locked behind one well-timed encryption. Impenetrable to any known species, crashing into except the floor. Jack wasn't any simulation known species. Began flickering. He didn't try to decrypt the AI wasn't just struggling. He didn't need to. It was failing to process he did the what dumbest, was most reckless, from the outside, most human thing possible. Xylox made a final adjustment. He reached under the console, no more standard loose panel, and pulled no more fixed parameters. Wires sparked. He activated the adaptive override. The screen flickered, turning the simulation error messages into a fully flooding across it in alien one that script. Learned and evolved. The AI tried to correct itself. Jack felt the shift. Jack had already found the environment didn't just react. A physical fail anticipated. He grabbed the moment he moved. The simulation collapsed. Rippled. Every escape route sealed itself before he could even attempt it. The room fell silent. Jack exhaled. Every alien now student still struggling. The AI wasn't trying to trap him was forcibly ejected. It was challenging. Jack Carter stood testing in the center of the chamber. He dove forward, dodging shifting terrain. That was fun. Forcing errors where none should exist. Artificial eyes narrowed. He tricked the system into correcting problems that didn't exist. Jack grinned, watching as it tripped just over never had a human try before. A narrow tunnel opened, then slammed shut the moment he approached. Except Jack wasn't going for the tunnel. He had baited it into closing while he slipped past a different route. Xylox's systems were overheating. The AI was running at maximum capacity, barely keeping up. Jack finally reached the end of the labyrinth. A final test. A locked terminal requiring an encryption key that only an advanced species could decipher. He cracked his knuckles. "I'm not playing your game." Instead of engaging the encryption, he stepped back, looked at the surrounding walls, and did something completely unexpected. He sat down. The AI hesitated. Jack didn't. He leaned back, hands behind his head. "I'm done." The system froze. This was a pass/fail challenge. The simulation could not conclude unless the subject attempted to escape. Jack was forcing a paradox. The environment started breaking down. The AI tried to recalibrate, but every calculation led to the same outcome. It had no solution for someone who refused to play by its rules. The walls flickered. The simulation trembled. And then, collapse. Jack snapped back into reality, blinking as the lab reappeared around him. Silence. The students stared. Xylox's processors ran so hot that his outer casing dimmed for a full 2 seconds. Jack stretched. "So, do I get extra credit or what?" Xylox had never been wrong before. Until today. The room remained silent, but the weight of what had just happened pressed down like a gravitational field. The simulation had collapsed twice. Not due to technical failure, but because a human had broken it in ways no one had even considered possible. The other students, some of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy, still struggled to process what they had witnessed. Some were in denial. Others were genuinely afraid. If a species as primitive as humanity could outthink a system designed by civilizations billions of years old, what else were they capable of? Xylox didn't like the answer. Again, he said, voice sharp, calculated. Jack Carter rolled his shoulders. Sure, but maybe throw in a challenge this time. The professor didn't react, but deep within his processing core, there was an undeniable sense of urgency. He had underestimated Jack, but that mistake wouldn't be made twice. This time, there would be no exploits. Jack felt it before he saw it. The way reality bent around him, the way his senses warped mid-transition. This wasn't just another simulation. This was something different. Then impact. He landed hard. Not on a floor. Not on any surface he could recognize. There was nothing. No walls. No light. No air. Just void. Jack exhaled slowly. All right, let's figure this out. The moment he spoke, sound failed. The words left his mouth but never reached his ears. No echoes. No vibrations. Then the temperature plummeted. A deep, suffocating cold that went beyond physical sensation. It was something more fundamental, something that whispered of a place where time and reality didn't exist. Xylox wasn't playing a game anymore. He had removed the rules entirely. Jack flexed his fingers, feeling the way his movements lagged, like he was moving through liquid reality. The environment wasn't meant to challenge him. It was meant to break him. For the first time, Jack understood what was happening. This wasn't a simulation. This was a prison. Xylox had built something beyond logic, beyond comprehension. A space designed to be unsolvable. Most beings would panic. Most would give up. Jack didn't have that luxury. Instead, he let go of everything he thought he knew. If the previous simulations had been based on structure, this one was based on absence. So Jack stopped fighting it. He closed his eyes, focused, and listened. Not with his ears, those weren't working, but with something deeper. Instinct. Awareness. Something moved. Not sound. Not sight. Just a feeling. A pulse. Faint but present. Like a heartbeat at the edge of the void. Jack reached for it. The world shifted. For a fraction of a second, the void cracked. A glimpse, just a glimpse of something beyond. A world running beneath the surface. Jack grinned. Found you. He didn't need to escape the prison. He just needed to make the prison doubt itself. He exhaled, let his body relax, and stopped resisting entirely. The void hesitated, because prisoners weren't supposed to do that. Jack let himself sink deeper into the nothingness, leaning into the paradox, forcing the simulation to recognize that he wasn't fighting. He was accepting. And the prison, built on the foundation of being an unbeatable trap, suddenly had no purpose. The cracks spread. Xylox's processors whirred into overdrive. The void should have erased Jack's mind by now, should have stripped him down to pure data and reset the simulation. But instead, the prison was breaking itself. The rules of the void were absolute. But Jack had just rewritten them. Then collapse. Jack gasped as reality snapped back into place. The void was gone, and he was standing face to face with Xylox himself. For the first time, the alien professor wasn't just a distant, untouchable overseer. He was here, present. His translucent body flickered slightly, the lines of data running through him unreadable. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow. That the best you got? The room was silent. The students, the academy, the entire structure of belief they had built around intelligence had just shattered. Xylox stared at Jack for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. You are not what we expected. Jack shrugged. You never really gave humans a chance. Xylox's processors hesitated. The truth was undeniable. Jack had done more than escape. He had done more than beat the test. He had broken the very concept of an unsolvable challenge. And for the first time in the Academy's history, the professor had no counterargument. Jack stood there, waiting. Xylox's translucent form flickered, the alien professor's processors working at full capacity. The other students had yet to move, yet to breathe. No one had ever seen this before, something beyond failure. The system wasn't just broken. The concept of it had unraveled. Xylox's voice, when it finally came, was measured. You believe this is victory? Jack exhaled, still catching his breath. It's not about winning. It's about proving that the game was rigged in the first place. Xylox's gaze never wavered. And yet you still played. Jack chuckled. Sure, but not by your rules. For the first time, Xylox considered something he had never computed before. What if humans weren't just unpredictable? What if they were something more dangerous? Tell me, human, Xylox said. Do you think yourself superior? Jack shook his head. I think we're different. You build your intelligence on patterns, on logic, on structure. We don't. We bend. We break. We adapt. He gestured toward the malfunctioning simulation, the silent students. And when we see something impossible, we find a way to make it possible. Xylox processed this in silence. Every species before had fit within the Academy's model, vastly different in biology but identical in function. Intelligence was a system, a framework, but humans had no pattern, no structure, no framework that could be predicted. Jack watched as the professor stood motionless, lines of energy flickering across his translucent body. He could tell that something fundamental was shifting within the alien's thought process. You are a danger, Xylox finally said. Jack smirked. Maybe, but only to people who think the universe should always follow their rules. The alien students flinched, their assumptions shattering. The Academy had always been absolute. Knowledge was rigid. Intelligence was measurable. But now, standing before them was an anomaly. A being that had rewritten the fundamental nature of the test. Not through brute force, not through superior intellect, but through something infinitely more dangerous. Refusal. Jack hadn't solved the problem. He had rejected the premise entirely. The room remained silent as Xylox turned, his glowing form flickering with unreadable emotion. You will leave this place, the professor said. Your kind is not ready for what we teach. Jack let the words hang in the air for a moment. Then finally he smiled. You're right, he said. We're not ready. He glanced at the malfunctioning system, the walls still trembling from his escape. But that's the thing about humans. He took a step toward the exit. We never wait until we're ready. The doors opened. Jack walked out. And the Academy would never be the same again.